Episode 3 is not gonna be what you think. I'm thinking it's gonna be a lot darker than episode 1 and 2 based on the evidence that we've gotten so far. Because the creators of the show are aiming to target a slightly older audience than the current one. Everyone knows the issue around the Amazing Digital Circus where Glitch and Gooseworks had to address the issue in the trailer video for the season, where they had Kane to say what is really happening in the audience of the show. And the Amazing Digital Circus, if you watch it on mute, can seem like a children's show because of its animation style and bright colors. And with the power of the content farm channels where they upload hundreds of videos about the characters not even following the plot of the actual show, is only making it even bigger and more into a kids show rather than a show for everyone. However, we do know that these kind of interpretations are really far from the truth, and especially how the show's main target audience is people in their 20s, we can guess that the creators are going to want to shift away from the previous categorization, which a lot of people have called it a kids show, but in reality it's a show for everyone aimed towards people at their 20s. And Gooseworks has already confirmed that this doesn't mean we're going to see explicit content, okay? There's no anything bad here, but rather the fact that they're going to go deeper on the psychological side of the story, which means that kids aren't even going to want to watch. They're not going to care about depression. They care about skibbity toilet. And as sad as this is, as sad as our society is, that's probably what'll happen. But this is where I see episode 3 taking a turn, as we saw this topic get introduced in episode 1 because we saw some things about the characters' personalities. For example, we saw Pomni spawn in and she was very shocked and scared, and later in episode 2 we saw how she made friends with Gummigoo after they shared their feelings about life with each other, which a lot of people should do. When's the last time you've talked about life? For me it's been a while, but back to the video. But as we know, Pomni didn't have the opportunity to be happy for too long because Kane immediately killed Gummigoo after he set foot in the circus. And while Pomni was in disbelief, later she realized she still has friends around and she just needs to accept their friendship, which is, I guess, our lesson for kids. It's a lesson for everybody, but I think it's gonna get a lot deeper in episode 3. And we know episode 3 is going to be about Zooble and someone else as well. So I'm guessing we'll finally see more about Zooble because in episode 1 and 2 she barely had any screen time, so she's really still a mystery to us, at least the deeper parts of her character. And I'm thinking that we're gonna see her on an adventure in episode 3 and see how she acts around the others, because the adventures are good for occupying the circus members' minds, but we can also see how they can create tension between people, just like Pomni and Ragatha, where Pomni decided not to save Ragatha. So I think that the reason why Zooble hates adventures and she's not going most of the time, or at least that's what we've seen, is because something might have happened to her, and she's probably not as forgiving as Ragatha is. So if somebody would have done the same to her what Pomni did to Ragatha, Zooble would have probably been fearful of going on any more adventures because of what happened. And I don't think that the other circus members would treat her badly, except for maybe Jax, because he just does whatever he feels like. And we saw in episode 1 and 2 that Jax does like to annoy Zooble, and Zooble didn't really seem too affected by it. She looked like she already got used to how Jax acts, so I'm not sure, maybe something else happened to her. But look at how Jax treats Zooble. He literally used her arm as a back scratcher. But also something that could get very deep is that Zooble could abstract. What if she doesn't go on the adventures because she's also focusing on the exit door? If you think about it, nobody really expected Cop Mode to abstract. They just went up to his room, opened the door, and there he was. Because they've seen abstraction so many different times, so you'd think that they'd start to recognize the signs, but they haven't. They came to his room and just, oh, there he is, big old Kaufmo. And so, what if Zooble not going on the adventures isn't occupying her mind and she secretly wants to exit the game? So maybe she's gonna be the first of the circus members that we've met to abstract, and then we'd have to deal with that, because is she dead or is she escaped from the circus? Is she in between? Who knows? But the interesting thing is we're also gonna focus on another character in this episode, and my guess is that it's gonna be Gangle. Gooseworks said that we are going to see why Gangle can't stay happy for too long, so that could be another approach of digging deeper into the characters' personalities. And so far what we've seen about Gangle, just like Zooble, isn't that much. However, Jax did say something very interesting to her in episode 2, where he said, aren't you supposed to be submissive and agreeable? And this makes me wonder, what if Gangle is actually actually having her mask being broken on purpose. Maybe Kane is having all these events break Gangle's mask, because think about it, the first time her mask broke was because Pomni spawned in, and maybe Kane could have chose Pomni to spawn right there so everyone would topple like dominoes and Gangle's mask would break. And as well, in episode 2, it was a mannequin that pushed over Gangle and broke her mask. And because of this, Gangle is perceived as this vulnerable character that Jax can bully however he wants, and she doesn't really stand up to him. And I think that their relationship will probably be explored more in future episodes, because Jax is trying to overpower Gangle in every situation, which must be horrible for Gangle. And she could feel stuck in her situation because she doesn't want to stand up for herself. So maybe we're gonna see her reach her breaking point eventually, but I really hope it's not gonna be because of Jax. And honestly, part of this submissive and agreeable comment is partly because Jax just hates women. I don't know why, that's one of his character traits, so maybe that's why a lot of people hate Jax. I think that's a good reason to dislike what he does, but I hope he does change. I really hope he does change. And honestly, he kinda is right now the most hated character because Gooseworks created him to be cruel, to the point where she even included him on the content warning list for the upcoming episodes. So I think that we're gonna see Jax being a lot worse than in episode 2, and we'll not only see him physically hurt others, but also mentally, because words are powerful things. And this, of course, will influence the circus members, even though they can't really be killed or hurt physically, but the emotional side is always there. Plus, we really don't know where the characters are coming from, or who they used to be in their human forms. We can only guess based on their personalities as the circus members. And so there's still a lot to discover with their personalities, and for Jax, I really hope he changes. I don't think he will, but I really hope he changes, and I hope it's just like a mask or a tough guy act or something along those lines. And also, there's the other characters we have to worry about, because Kinger and Ragatha seem to be very unstable, and it makes me think whether or not there's hope for Pomni at all, because we saw that with time, the characters eventually adapt to their circumstances. If you remember what Kinger said, he was talking about how long it took for Ragatha to get used to the circus. But with Kinger, it could be even worse, because he seems like he's not even present most of the times, and he just goes on the adventures as a daily routine, almost like a chore, and he looks like he could snap at any moment. And Ragatha seems fine, but if she always represses things that she has to deal with, and she can't really get these frustrations out in the form of talking about them, then she'll eventually go crazy. So maybe Pomni will also get used to the circus, but only if she finds a not so healthy way to cope with everything, because that seems to be what the other circus members are doing. And obviously this is not healthy to do, which is why I said not so healthy. But if she has all these people around her negatively influencing her with these bad ways of coping with the circus, then she's gonna cope with it in bad ways. So she really needs to be that person to find the good way. Or hopefully the scene that we saw at the end of episode 2, where she realized how important friendships are in the circus, could be what saves Pomni from going insane. But honestly, as much as we saw Pomni, we can be sure that she's still gonna have a hard time in the circus, and that could be a psychological element that Gooseworks was talking about, which could make episode 3 darker than normal. And I think that younger kids probably aren't gonna understand these deeper, maybe even underlying topics, which the show is gonna focus on at some points. And while they could probably enjoy episode 1, which was more of an introduction and a fun, colorful thing, they probably noticed in episode 2, where a lot of the episode was about Gummigoo's realization that his life is meaningless. And they'll probably go even deeper with episode 3, because Gooseworks got a question on Tumblr. My friends keep insisting The Amazing Digital Circus is a kids show, even though I've said multiple times the next episodes ain't gonna be for kids. What do I do? And Gooseworks replied, when it comes out, show them episode 3. So I think that episode 3 will explore something really dark about Zooble or Gangle, and we saw how topics like grief and existence already appeared in episodes 1 and 2. So maybe in episode 3 we'll see someone abstract, and this time we could see the whole process of abstraction, which is actually still a mystery to us. Maybe it's a painful experience, or maybe it's possible that the other circus members will see that experience, which would be pretty dark. Imagine seeing someone you care about not just die, but go through a painful process where they turn into a huge monster, only to later be put away by Kane into a cellar for what seems to be eternal punishment, like the real life hell. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see what Gooseworks actually meant by episode 3 being dark. Let me know what you think will happen in episode 3 down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video here.